Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Leading the Way Today, powered by Leadership America. I'm Scott Murray.
And I'm Angel Carlton. Great to have you with us as we share with you the insights of prominent and influential leaders from some of the most recognized companies and organizations in America.
We're going to be taking a peek behind the curtain at all of these successful for-profit and not-for-profit entities and share their secrets and strategies for success, as well as their perspectives on leadership and life.
From culture to collaboration, creativity to innovation, transparency to diversity, we'll be addressing how these leaders in America are creating legacies and leading the way today.
We are really excited to welcome a gentleman from West Point, and with us today is the Superintendent of the United States Military Academy at West Point. That's kind of like a CEO, I guess, best put, in corporate America. Honored to welcome Lieutenant General Robert Caslen. Thank you so much for being here. You've got a busy schedule, and here you take time to come up to the studio to see us.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the invitation very much. Angel, great to be here, too. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for being here. Yeah. What a treat.
We're excited.
So glad this worked out.
Well, before we talk with the General, let me tell you a little something about West Point. It is the oldest continuously occupied military post in the entire United States. That's right. It's located in New York State along the Hudson River, identified by General George Washington. I'm sure you all know who he was, as the most important strategic position in all of America during the American Revolution. And it takes up about 16,000 acres, including the campus of the United States Military Academy, which is commonly called, as we said, West Point. Established back in 1802 and is the nation's oldest service academy. So we're very, very excited to have yet another leader. This is what this show is all about, leading the way. We talk to people that understand what culture is all about, diversity, strategy, innovation, and certainly leadership. And when you talk to people in the military, and I have to say, I'm most honored and most privileged to have been involved in never served. There wasn't much going on in our world, thankfully. Back when I was military age, I guess, or out of college, I went to college, and there was no draft. There wasn't much of anything. But at the time, I was most impressed by all my dad had done in the Air Force, and my grandfather served in both the Navy and the Army. So it's very special to have you here today, General. When I say football, that's got to be a special part for, I'm sure, the Army, even though that's not what you do on a day-to-day basis. Huh? Do you like coming to things like this?
Well, I think it's important for America. You know, when we're the United States Army West Point football team, but you know, when I think the average American looks out there and sees Army playing football, they just don't see us as West Point. They see us represent the United States Army. When they see their Army, they expect it to go out there and look good or to do its best. They expect it to accomplish the mission and win. They want to see tough, mental and physically tough. They want to see tenacious men on the field, because those are the same men that are going to be leading America's sons and daughters in the crucible of ground combat someday.
How about having a general here today? You enjoying this?
I think
you're
it's
so
great.
used to
And
talking to CEOs, but talk about leaders. This is what it's all about.
No, and just reading your background about your military career. I mean, Scott, you said nothing was going on in the world of war when you were a youngster, but my goodness, you were involved with quite a bit in your military career, including Operation Desert Storm, and you were actually there at the Pentagon on September 11th, that dreaded day.
Yes, so we knew that, well, we had watched what was going on in New York City. We thought that if this was going to be some type of terrorist attack, the next target was going to be some type of command and control facility. Never expected it was going to be the Pentagon. I was fortunately 2 sides over, and when the plane hit, you know, we were all evacuated. I found a way to get back into the Pentagon so that we can stand up the command center so that we can begin to communicate with the executive branch of our government and try to assess what else has occurred and then begin the efforting the necessary aid and assistance.
You know, one of the things that Angel makes a great point when she talks about 9/11, what took place back in 2001. But just a couple of weeks ago, we had Don Carty on the air with us, who's the former CEO at American Airlines, and he was the CEO at the time, 9/11, and he kind of took us back through what it was like. And he said, that's when you really learn if you're going to be a good leader or not, is through times of crisis. And certainly that's what you're dealing with almost on an everyday basis, is it not? At least during times of war.
Well, you know, the true measure of one's character is not when you're riding the wave way up on top. It's when you're down in the pit of the deepest pit and it's full of sand and you're trying to get your way out of there. And that's where you find those are the attributes that really build the character I think that's necessary, that if you're going to lead America's sons and daughters in the crucible of ground combat, those are the characteristics that you really need.
We've got a number of questions here that we thought we would ask you,
Sure.
but I'd like to go back to the very, very beginning, General, where you first had the desire to say, you know what, I want to be involved with the military. I want to make this a lifelong occupation of sorts. Where did that all come about? Where you're from originally, and you said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do with my life.
Yeah, I was born in the state of Connecticut, but when I was in middle school, my dad and my mom took a ski trip on vacation up to Vermont. My dad was a school teacher, so he wanted to try something different, so he bought a ski lodge up in northern Vermont. So I did my high school years up there, played football, was on the ski team and the track team. And out of that, I got recruited to come to West Point and to Navy and a couple other places. And so the more I checked out West Point, the more I saw some tremendous opportunities. But that was towards the end of the Vietnam War. I graduated in 1971. The war, as you know, was not popular. Most of my teachers found ways not to go to Vietnam, and there was a lot of concern that my teachers and mentors within the high school had expressed about my desire to go into the military. But I knew that there was a lot of tremendous opportunity, plus the honor to serve your country. West Point also was not an automatic obligation. You can go 2 years there before you're obligated to serve. So I knew that if it wasn't going to work out, that at least I had that 2-year period. But it did work out. I actually loved what was going on at West Point. It was tough. It was hard. It was a great cohesion that was created as a result of everybody going through some real tough circumstances. And then when I got in the Army, I knew I was going to do 5 years, but I was not committed to stay in after 5 years when I was commissioned. But when I got in the Army, I absolutely loved the Army. I loved I was in the infantry, so I loved the brotherhood, the cohesion that you really made. Since I was on the football team and played football at West Point, it was just a great carryover, because that same brotherhood and cohesion that you saw in sports had great carryover into the cohesion that you saw in infantry platoons and things of that sort. Absolutely loved it. And I had some other really broadening assignments and great assignments. I actually had an assignment back to West Point as a football coach. So I was one of the assistant coaches, and I was one of the TAC officers as well. Was able to get some additional education at the graduate level, and then continued in the Army. The Army is great because they put these carrots in front of you that encourage you to kind of stay and pursue the next carrot, whether it's a promotion or a command. But the more I got in the Army, the more I loved the Army, the more I loved the opportunity to serve our country, the more I loved the soldiers, the men and women that we're serving. And I think if the average American wants to see what's right with America, they just look at our Army and our Navy and our Air Force, our Coast Guard, and they'll see young men and women who are standing in the gap to protect all of America. And it's very inspiring just to be around those young men and women.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
I agree.
I can imagine that. Go ahead. I know you've got a question.
Well, I know we typically start our interviews with something we call the lightning round.
Oh,
and
great.
these are just quick,
it's fun, General.
short,
Believe me, it's fun.
Quick, short answers.
It's not tough.
And we want to get to know a little bit about you and your journey to where you are today.
You've kind of addressed the first one, because it's quite simply, what was your first job and what did you learn from it? Just as a kid.
Oh, my first job as a kid was a paper boy.
Yep.
Oh.
See? Yeah. Okay. So that makes it 82%, because about 80% of every CEO we've had in here, all the leaders, I was a paper boy.
Yeah. You don't see that very much today, but I was a paper boy. I loved it. It was great. And and I love meeting all the different people in the neighborhood. And
Right.
really teaches you responsibility. It teaches you duty. It's your duty.
Absolutely.
People are depending upon you. And so those are some great attributes. Of course, money management and stuff like that. But those are attributes that I think are essential in growing up. And then that type of discipline that you've learned and that duty ethic has got great carryover back through college and even afterwards.
It's with you for a lifetime, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm
it sure
starting
is.
to see some commonalities between being the paper boy and being a leader, because typically leaders are the ones that are early risers, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And being a paper boy, as being your first job, you have to get up early.
Well, all these guys, they knew.
Get those newspapers out.
One guy said, I had one route going. I thought, you know what? I can go a couple of streets over. I can get another one and double the cash.
That's right.
So, I said they were always thinking. Did you know Joe DePinto? He was a paper boy. Joe DePinto went to he was another guest of ours back in November, the CEO right now of 7-Eleven, and is a West Point grad.
Mm-hmm. No, I know him. I know him real well. He's a great guy.
Isn't he a great guy?
He's one of our great graduates.
Super guy.
Yeah,
super guy. All right, go ahead, Angel.
So who would you consider to be your top 2 mentors in life, and how did they influence you?
Yeah, well, there's some great retired general officers right now. I think Fred Franks is just a magnificent man. He was the 7th Corps commander during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. He's like the Yoda, so when he speaks, you just stop what you're doing and listen to him. I think a couple of chiefs of staff of the Army that have really helped me in my job as a superintendent, General Shinseki and General Odierno, they have taken a special interest in some of the circumstances that are going on at West Point, and they have mentored and guided me along the way. When they talk or when a phone call comes in, I really value their opinions on different things.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good.
Most significant experience in developing your skills as the leader that you have become. What comes to mind?
The most significant, the one as a leader right now?
Yeah, is something that really stands out. If you were to share something, this is really important. You've got to always remember this if you're going to be the ultimate leader.
Yeah, I really believe that probably one of the most important things, whether you're a junior leader, whether you're a senior leader, is character. Because you could be the number one person in your class and you can be the number one athlete in the entire company. You could be number one in anything, but if you fail in character, then you fail in leadership. And building leaders of character is what we do at West Point. We take that very seriously and very personal. And whether you're on the football team or whether you are on any other particular sport or whether you're a cadet within a company, just not on any other extracurricular activity, your character becomes the most important thing of development that we do at West Point.
Great answer.
We see that all the time in senior leaders. I mean, they're very, very proficient in a lot of things, but if there's a character defect, it doesn't care about how good you are and how competent you are anymore.
Yeah, nothing else matters, does it?
That's right.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's great. And our generation coming up can definitely use some training in that, and we all could. So, speaking of the next generation, what advice would you give someone, a new cadet who's stepping into this changing world? What leadership advice would you give them?
Well, first I would say open up your mind, because there's so much intellectually that's going on. And what we want to do is we want to teach and develop young men and women who are critical thinkers, who really understand the in-depth of what's going on, the second, third, fourth order effects and the consequences. And they have the ability to not only think critically, but to really think with agility so that they can recognize opportunity, and then when they can't recognize it, they can create it. And I think that's important. And then we want our leaders not only to be intellectually competent, but I think it's critically important they're physically competent, because we are the Army. We don't, not to be disparaging, we don't fight wars in the Army at 30,000 feet in the air in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We fight in the crucible of ground combat where the conditions are the worst and it's the meanest and the ugliest. And you have to lead, and you have to share hardships, and you have to lead from the front. And that type of leadership means you have to be physically capable and competent to do that. And then, as I said before, you have to be a man and a woman of extraordinary character, because you can be the most physical or the smartest, but if you fail in character, you fail in leadership. And it's simple as that. Mm. On top of that, America entrusts their sons and daughters to us to lead 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have to be men and women of character, both in our public life and in our private life. We don't have the luxury of turning character on and turning character off. We don't have the luxury of going on social media and posting stuff on social media that we would never do in public. And because that's what America expects of its Army and the leaders in the Army, and that's what we are charged to do.
Great answer. Great answer.
Yeah, so true.
Just the answer you'd expect from the superintendent at West Point, I guess, huh?
Well, that's great advice for everybody.
Great advice. Outstanding. So that said and done, let me ask you as we wrap up our lightning round segment, how would you define your legacy? You've still got lots more to accomplish and achieve and what have you in your lifetime, no question. But at this point, how would you define your legacy?
Well, the legacy of the superintendent is simply the men and women that you have developed who are now in West Point and graduated from West Point, who are now leading America's sons and daughters. And we're in a very uncertain security environment in our nation and in the world. We've been at war against terrorism now for 16 years plus. Our soldiers and our graduates have been in and out of this war on numerous occasions. Their families are backing and supporting them. And, we want them to be able to persevere through all of that and to be able to lead and continue to lead with character and with tremendous competence and have the trust and confidence of the American people.
You mentioned agility a little bit earlier and the importance of that in building up the next generation. How do you train for agility? I mean, what are some of the ways that you can train these young cadets for the changing world and maybe a circumstance where they have to use that critical thinking and be quick on their feet?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a story. Maybe
Okay.
I can answer that with
I
a
love
story.
stories.
I was a division commander in northern Iraq towards the end of the surge in 2008 and 2009, and I had a battalion commander that commanded his men and women around Balad. Balad was just outside of Samara. Samara was where you had the Golden Mosque, and Zarqawi blew up the Golden Mosque in order to create the strife between Sunnis and Shias within Iraq in that civil war. So it was a very hostile area. So this is thinking with agility. So what does he do to fight this war? He finds two wealthy Iraqis and convinced them to pull their money together to create an Iraqi bank. And under Saddam, no one had ever heard of that. So this was new to everybody, but these two men had trusted him enough that they did pull their money and they started lending it out. So one guy took a loan out from this, and he had a tomato paste factory that was all dilapidated, and with the loan, he got his tomato paste factory up and running again. And now that he got the tomato paste factory, well, all the farmers in the area who had stopped farming because of the war that was going on now had a market that they could bring their tomatoes to because the tomato paste factory was working. So they all went back to farming again. Interestingly enough, if you're going to farm in Iraq, you got to get the water out of the Tigris River into the canals and out of the canals into the fields. So the only way you're going to do that is get the electrical grid working so that you can pump and the pumps can start working, get the canals fixed because they were all dilapidated and all in disrepair, full of silt. And that's the responsibility of the local government. The towns and the villages had to get that electrical grid up and running again. The farmers put pressure on the local government. The local government responded. And they responded and they fixed all the canals. They got the electricity up and running again. And then next thing you know, you got irrigation into the fields and they're growing tomatoes like crazy. But the key piece of all of that, this is some agility, is that the farmers and the local people now trusted their government because it was legitimate in their eyes because it provided for their essential services. So now they're growing tomatoes like crazy, so they bring them into the tomato paste factory, which just happens to be alongside the main highway from Baghdad to Mosul, and all the cars are parked along waiting to drop their tomatoes off, and they're plugging the highway. So it's the main highway. No one liked to be in the traffic jams that it created, so some entrepreneurial Iraqi created a parking lot so they can be in the parking lot, and once they're in the parking lot, you got a bunch of hungry farmers waiting to drop their tomatoes off. So another entrepreneur Iraqi started a restaurant. Another one built a small little hotel. And then all these other businesses started spinning off, one with labels, another with tin cans and things like that. And next thing you know, Balad became one of the most safest places in all of Iraq when previously was hostile.
Wow.
And that's thinking with agility. That's thinking critically. That's being able to have interpersonal skills to develop relationships because that battalion commander didn't have to fire a single round. He had the intellectual agility to be able to recognize where the opportunities were and to create those opportunities as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a great way to fight
I love
a war
that story.
right there.
That's a great story.
That is great. What a domino effect that it has to
absolutely.
build up that economy and the whole society. And
Absolutely.
Good example of that, too.
How long were you in Iraq?
I was in Iraq that time for a year, and then I went back about a year and a half later for 21 months.
Oh, you're kidding. So almost 2 years, another 2 years.
Yeah, so I was a commander that was going to command the residual force, but since the residual force didn't occur, I ended up commanding the security cooperation mission. And watch the entire Maliki government implode, watch Iranian influence take place, watch the polarization of the Sunnis, and as a result, you had the rebirth of ISIS that took place. So I was there when Ramadi fell and Fallujah fell, and I left right before Mosul fell. So
you talk
really
about
sad
ISIS.
to see all that take place.
Absolutely. You talk about ISIS. I don't want to put you on the spot, and if there's some security reasons or whoever you can't respond to this, that's fine. But I just wondered, what is your concern? I mean, with all the places you've been and everything, we're all concerned about different things every day, and we see all the stuff that goes on right here in our own country. What are the things that we should be concerned as we approach this new year as a citizen, or what can we do? What help us be the be the leader and make us aware of what we might do as just citizens?
Yeah, well, one of my observations, particularly in northern Iraq, were three significant divides that took place, not only in Iraq but in the Middle East. The first divide was between moderate Sunnis and radical Sunnis, and that created the awakening, if you remember. That's when the moderates rose up and opposed the radicals.
Mm-hmm.
And then those who were insurgents before now became the Sons of Iraq, and the moderate Sunnis supported both the provincial elections and then the parliamentary elections, and they put their trust back in the government. It was, by the way, those same moderate Sunnis that became polarized after 2011 American withdrawal because the Maliki government had polarized them. And that's another story. So that's one divide. The second divide is just strictly between Sunnis and Shias. You read about that all the time.
Absolutely.
And Iraq being 65% Shia and 15% Kurd, and then about 25% Sunni, you still have the heart of that divide is right there in the middle of Iraq. But you see it playing out in Syria, you see it playing out in Yemen as well, and a lot of that has to do with Shia support from Iran and Sunni support from elsewhere within the Middle East. And then you have the other divide, which is the Kurd-Arab divide. And the Kurds end up being the largest ethnic group in the world that does not have their own country. And you have Kurds that are not only in northern Iraq, but also, as you've seen, in northern Syria. You have them in southeastern Pakistan and southwestern Iran. So that whole swath of area right there is an ethnic group that is trying to create their own country, but they can't. So those divides take place right in the middle of all that. How does that affect us? Well, it affects us because there is years and generations of mistrust between Sunnis and Shias, between Kurds and Arabs. In the Middle East, over these generations, have never reconciled. They have never been made right in each other's eyes again. They have been oppressed and oppressing those ethnic groups again and again and again. And as a result, there's tremendous mistrust and hatred, and you can see it over and over again. And I'm afraid in our own nation, without reconciliation in some of the situations that we find ourselves, that we just continue to build mistrust. And if that mistrust continues generation after generation after generation, because reconciliation in the United States has not occurred, if you want to see what that looks like, just go to where we have been fighting the war for the last 16 years, and you'll see exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
And this should be a call for us to get together, to cooperate, to create empathy, to understand each other, to find common ground, to move forward. And I think that's one of the things that our nation can learn from what our experiences were over the last 16 years and move forward.
Well, then let me ask you this. In developing leadership with the cadets at West Point, when a freshman class comes in, what are you looking for? What is the young man or young woman that you're looking for to be a part of the Army, be a part of the military?
Yeah, well,
and just how you share with them the importance of those leadership qualities.
The beauty of West Point is that to come to West Point, you have to get a nomination from your congressman or your senator. So by design, it creates tremendous diversity, and you got geographic diversity, ethnic diversity in itself. In the diversity, we try at West Point to try to model the diversity that we see in the Army and in the United States. So we need to develop our leaders to not only lead in diverse organizations, but know how to, through leadership, to build inclusive teams where everybody, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexual orientation, because all of them are in their organizations today, to build inclusive teams where everybody is valued and everybody is respected, they feel they're a contributing member, and that they feel that they're safe and secure both emotionally and physically. And then that's what we want in our leaders, not only to become competent, not only to be men and women of character, but men and women who know how to lead diverse organizations. And to be able to do that, you have to come to grips with some of your own biases that you may not even understand that you have. And to understand what they are, and then to work your way through some of them so that you know as a leader that you can lead and build inclusive teams. Because you could say something, and you're a platoon leader, second lieutenant platoon leader, 21, 22-year-old men or women in charge of about 30 to 40 soldiers. And they're going to be as diverse as you can imagine. You can say something or do something that without you even knowing it can polarize them. And they will feel that they're mistrusted. Units operate best when there's cohesion, and cohesion is the result of trust. And trust is built when you build up people and edify people rather than polarize people. And that's why it's important to know how, as a leader, to build inclusive teams.
Great advice.
Yeah, I find it really a coincidence that what you're speaking about, as far as what's really important in the military, is equally important in the corporate world. We're talking about the same thing as far as putting our focus on trust in the workplace trusting your leaders, trusting your workforce, and also diversity and inclusion, and building that as well. So that's great leadership. Gosh, I'm so curious because I've never, this is kind of new to me, learning all this stuff about West Point. It's fascinating. Tell us, what is a day in the life like for a cadet who attends West Point?
There's not much time to breathe, practically. So they'll get up. A
little different from going to your traditional college, I would imagine.
There's about, I'd say, 10% of the Corps cadets that will get up around 5 o'clock in the morning and do PT from 5:30 to 6:30, maybe 20%.
Wow.
I like, as a superintendent, to go out there and do PT with them in the mornings, and I encourage them to come out there.
Oh, that's great.
And then they'll go right into classes. So they have classes starting at 7:30, and they'll have breakfast in the morning with a breakfast formation. Then they have class. The class goes all the way till lunch. Then they have lunch for about a half hour. So they have formation. Then they march into the mess hall. 4,400 cadets will all eat in 15 minutes. And then they test that half hour to get their books and go to class. And then they have a couple classes in the afternoon. And then the entire Corps cadets is involved in athletics. Last class all the way up to dinner time, which are your NCAA, the director of intercollegiate athletics. Then you have some club sports like triathlon and marathon and crew and things like that. Boxing is a club sport. If you're not in a club sport or an NCAA athletic sport, then you're going to be doing intramurals, company athletics, and they have competitions and then championship playoffs and things of that sort themselves for both the fall and the spring. And then you have dinner, which is from, let's say, 6 to 6:30. And then you have an opportunity for about an hour there to do meetings and get yourself prepared and whatever else the organization has to be doing. The plebes, freshmen have to deliver laundry and do other different type of duties and responsibilities, clean latrines and all that. And then at 7:30, it starts evening study period. Wow. And everything shuts down except studying. So the cadets will study in the room. They'll study together. Collaboration rooms will go to the library and whatever they need to do, all the way till 11:30 when TAPS occurs. Or TAPS is 11:30, 12 o'clock is when everything wraps up. And then you're allowed to stay up after TAPS if you need to. We try to encourage them to get to bed so they can get at least 6 hours of sleep.
I know you get 5 or 6
never
hours.
A dull moment.
My gosh!
And and it starts that way. And then and there's like 130 clubs. So on weekends, the cadets are signed up on clubs and they go on club trips and they do other type of things, whether it's an academic club or a sports club or a faith or religious club or any type of clubs that are out there. So it's that they are all joined in and they participate in those club activities on weekends. So it goes, a day goes by fast, a week goes by faster, and the months and the semester go by in the blink of an eye.
I would imagine that routine is really important in developing them as leaders as well.
Well, from a disciplinary standpoint, it certainly would be.
One of the challenges, ironically, that we have is because there's so many demands that cadets are still tied to social media from their high school days and their iPhones and stuff like that. So when they start sitting down to study and all of a sudden someone's texting them, they have a hard time dealing with the study and the concentration of the study and then moving their mind over to the text and responding, then moving their mind back into the academic work. And the distractions have a cumulative effect on them over time. So they have to learn how to manage their time, and they have to learn how to deal with all the distractions that occur with the technology of today. It's one of the challenges we're seeing in the new freshmen that are coming in. Mm-hmm. By the time they're sophomore and juniors, they pretty much have figured it out. But even some of our very smartest cadets have a hard time with all the distractions that are out there.
Yeah, social media is a new thing for what we have to deal with
technology.
Day in and day out.
Huge
Absolutely. Absolutely. You were talking about the fact that it's 7:30 and then up till midnight or whenever they're studying. How much of that is academic? How much is that learning what you want them to learn about being a member of the armed forces and what they're going to have to do as leaders out in the trenches? Yeah,
well, we develop cadets militarily with a military program, academic and physical program, and a character program. And the military program is principally in the summertime.
I see.
And each summer they have different type of military training that takes place. During the academic year, there is a military course, an academic course. So and it plays off from the summer. So getting ready to go into their sophomore summer and their freshman year, they'll learn how to conduct patrols. They'll learn how to write an operations order. And then they go do that in the summer when they're out there. And the military academic training is part of the academic curriculum, but only for a small amount of credit hours, similar to what you find in ROTC curriculums as well.
So there's no summer vacation if you go to West Point.
We try to give them about a week and a half, 2 weeks leave in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
But cadets will give up their summer vacation to go on internships. 25% of the Corps cadets will go on an internship every summer, and those are across the country, and about a third of them are overseas as well. And some of those internships are really magnificent.
Well, I'll tell you what, as I was sitting here today listening to everything you've said, I know a lot of people that have been to the service academies, whether it was West Point or someplace else, and I have never, to this day, never heard any one of those cadets, midshipmen, whoever it might be, ever say that they regretted going to the service academy. And I probably know more from West Point than all the other service academies. And everybody is so proud. They just tell you immediately, yeah, West Point. I mean, so you're doing something right. You really are. You just never hear. I'm sure there's some out there. I apparently just haven't met them. But I mean, that speaks volumes. How many times oh gosh, I went to that school. I went to that. It was all right. Yeah, it was good.
Right.
Boy, I mean, they're tall and
they're
proud.
Of all
they're
the hard
tall
work,
and proud. Yeah.
Sounds like that they had to put in, and the individuals that they become because of it.
Well, the military academies are not easy. They're not easy physically. They're not easy intellectually. So when you have persevered through that crucible, you get out. You emerge on the other side very proud of what you have endured, what you have accomplished, and you're very proud to be among the cohort of men and women who have successfully completed that.
Yeah, you talked about collaboration a little bit earlier. How do they collaborate at school to help prepare them for the battlefield?
Well, first thing they do is they collaborate among each other to help prepare to pass the next test or to write the next paper. I'm amazed on how willing cadets are to help each other, and the cadets that are having difficulty, that they really go out of their way to help each other, even among some of the athletic teams, like let's say the football team. So if some of the freshmen are having trouble with this one particular course, they'll all get together in the evening, and then some of the upperclassmen will come in and share their knowledge and what they know about what's going on, stuff like that. So that's great collaboration. On top of that, there's plenty of assistance that they can get from instructors or from the academic departments. We also have a course, it's a capstone course that we call an MX 400 that really is designed to take all of the learning that you have occurred while you're a cadet at West Point and translate it to what it means to be an officer in the profession of arms in the United States Army. It's a tough course, and they look and study lieutenants and how they are doing in the Army and their ranks and weaknesses and the good things they do and some challenges that they had. They read a book called Black Hearts, which is kind of a sad story of what happened in Iraq with one of our military units. And they study the junior leadership in that particular course. And they write papers on leadership. They write their own leadership philosophy. They have to share and talk about it as part of the curriculum. And then at the end of the year, we bring in recent graduates and recent men and women who are junior leaders, both non-commissioned officers and officers who recently deployed. And they come in and they sit down in a series of seminars with the graduating seniors so that they can exchange information, ideas, thoughts, lessons learned, and things like that in preparation for what they're going to do when they graduate.
Very interesting.
In the springtime, you're going to be graduating pretty soon. You're going to be joining a unit that will probably see yourself downrange. It's like E.F. Hutton, man. When those young men and women start sharing their experiences, when they talk, everybody's listening and paying attention. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we've got time. Do you have one more question? Because we're about out of time. I did have. Do you have something?
Oh, I've got a ton of questions.
I was just going to ask if you were given here you are, the superintendent. I mean, that's the top dog at West Point. And I just wondered, with all that you've gone through, and we talked a little bit about your legacy and what have you before, but if there's one thing that you would like to share with all Americans, you could share with me, you could share with Angel, you could share with all of our listeners. You had the pulpit and the stage with which to say, you know what? We live in the greatest country on the face of this earth. We've got to continue to make it the biggest and the best and just what it is so we can all enjoy the freedoms that we do and all the people that come to your school, to your organization, to the armed forces at West Point. keeping us all out of harm's way every single day. What would you share with us or say to us as Americans as we begin this new year about what part we can do to be good leaders, to be strong, from an integrity standpoint, and talk about the trust and the transparency and some of the things that you talk about?
Well, that's a great question, Scott. I think if the average American wants to see what's right with America, all they have to do is look at the Corps cadets, look at the Brigade of Midshipmen, and the cadets at the Air Force Academy and Coast Guard Academy. These are the best in America. These are young men and women that, contrary to the vast majority of their peers, have decided to serve their country, to stand in the gap between the evil that's out there and America and America's freedom. And I know America appreciates their contribution, their sacrifice very much, and that means an awful lot to them. I think they're, because of the all-volunteer Army and the tendency to even serve with families, siblings just continue to serve, that we have a growing civ-mil gap. And it's important for us in the military to reach out to the American people so that American understands what their military is doing, what they're all about. I think equally that the American people should reach out towards the military and hold the military accountable for what we're doing. And then at the same time, expand your understanding of what's going on in the military, what's going on with our national security, and stay involved in the national security affairs. And then to encourage those men and women who are in the military serving and standing in the gap that I talked about. Because that if that civ-mil gap continues to widen, then frankly, there can be either tremendous trust that the military can go off on a tangent it shouldn't, or that it gets to a point where it was like it was back in the Vietnam days, where a lot of people really did not trust what was going on in the military. There's got to be that communication, that linkage, I think, between America and our military.
Lieutenant General Robert Caslen, Superintendent at West Point. Can't thank you enough. And maybe most importantly, thanks for your service. Thanks for allowing us to have the privilege to spend a little time with you here today. But thank you for your service and all you continue to do with our young men and women.
Well, Scott, thanks. And honor to talk to your audience as well. And I thank them for listening and the time they took to just listen to the conversation that we had today. It means an awful lot. I appreciate it.
You're very, very
Angel,
welcome.
Thank you as well.
Yeah,
You're
thanks
very
for being
welcome.
here.
Until next week, I'm Scott Murray.
And I'm Angel Carlton.
Don't forget to live your legacy by leading the way. Thanks so long, everybody.